Welcome to the webinar on how to unite a business and supercharge growth. Speaking is Tom Kerr, that's me, of Aura, and the presentation that is going to be delivered today will be delivered by Rupesh Patel, who is Marketing Strategy Controller at Sky, and Lindsey Greig, who's partner at Redblue. In the session, Rupesh and Lindsey will explore how to develop and embed a long-lasting and robust segmentation. They've designed a unique approach to this problem, and it has resulted in the implementation of a segmentation that is being leveraged right across Sky's business. It's had a profound effect on the way Sky markets its products and services, and it has enabled Sky to keep customers at the heart of what it does. So what's not to like? One of the key principles of all of the Aura seminars and webinars is to ensure that you leave this event with learnings that you can immediately put into practice. And the key takeaways from this session will include how to create a robust, long-lasting segmentation, why segmentations can fail and how to succeed, and third, how to get buy-in and unite the business to drive growth. It's now for me to hand over to Rupesh, who will take the lead on the presentation. Rupesh, over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Tom, for that. And thank you to Aura for hosting this webinar for us. Look, today I'm going to talk to you about my experience in landing a single segmentation across Sky's business and really show you how we've truly moved the dial on ensuring there are more and more customer first decisions made within the organization. Look, I know that there are some new cool, funky tools out there in the market, AI, machine learning, all out there talking about how they're making their businesses more customer first. But for me, nothing beats a good old fashioned segmentation to corral the whole workforce, to keep to a concise way of looking at the market and make sure everyone across that workforce is really truly putting the customer at the heart of everything that they do. Look, before I start, I am also very aware that there are going to be segmentations out there that don't need to be as famous as potentially this one that we've done here. There are segmentations that need to be strong in and specific in exactly what they do. But the one that I'm going to talk to you about is one that tries to address a far-ranging number of needs. Okay, so if we start on my first slide, let's start first at thinking about the consumer today and the expectations they're putting onto businesses. Consumers are expecting companies to know exactly what they want and want companies to market to them how they feel they should be marketed to. They don't want to work hard to see which of your products might be for them. They don't want a buffet style suite of products, which then they have to then choose what products for them. They want you and organizations to know what they want, and it's for us as organizations to serve that to consumers. And the proof is in the pudding. Companies like HelloFresh, Deliveroo, Uber, all these companies have grown really, really fast, and they've done that because they felt to the consumer like they know what the consumer wants. And that's not just about, and I'm not just talking about products, but I'm talking about marketing and marketing communications, feeling as though that marketing is for me, and that billboard and that TV ad feels like it's something that is for me in particular. So you don't need to try to please everybody with a generic message or a generic product, but what you do need to do is feel like you're a master of each and every single consumer, and you know them well in the way you've designed your products and your marketing. So when we think about Sky and Sky's problem on my next slide, I think the first thing that we did when we started this journey is we actually realized that various different product areas within Sky, whether it was a Sky Cinema product, a Sky Movies product, broadband, mobile, TV, each of those departments in each of those product areas, they had their own segmentation because they knew the value of keeping the consumer first within each of their areas. So they had segmentations that existed already. However, the challenge becomes when the Sky Cinema team, for example, comes to the table into a more of a wider team and says, look, I'm going after Star Wars fans in December, and the sports team was saying, well, I'm going to go after football fans. And suddenly you start to realize that all that hard work that you'd done to bring the customer to the forefront, when you bring that into a group discussion, it becomes really difficult for various different teams to understand, well, who is a Star Wars fan and who is a football fan, and are they the same people and are they different? That's when the consumer-led decisions can start to fall back. And that's why a unified segmentation was something that was really important for Sky to go and try to challenge ourselves on. So look, the big challenge, apart from that, was on my next slide, where we talk about what is a segmentation? How do people around the business view a segmentation, and what are their needs? And you know, if you do an interview around the business to various departments, and you'll come to realize that everyone's got a different opinion. Everyone thinks a segmentation has a different purpose. So for example, the media organization will be talking about, well, how can I find them in a TV advertising or in press advertising? The creative guys would be talking about, well, how does it really change the tone and language and the message within my marketing? Then your below the line marketing and your one-to-one marketing guys will be like, well, how does the segmentation really fit into my database so that I can send emails and I can send door drops to these people? So a segmentation for us at Sky, especially, we started to realize that the terminology was quite different with different stakeholders, and we had a wide range of needs that we needed to adhere to. So as you can imagine, it was a big project, really ambitious, and a really ambitious brief, where we had to bring the business together through inventing or creating a window into the consumer world that unified everybody. We needed to have the use case of each of those each of those segmentations to be different. How does it work for media? How does it work for creative? How does it work for messaging? How does it work for product and proposition? It had to service a wide range of needs. And that's where we looked to Redblue. They seemed like perfect partners to work with us on this project. And I'll hand over to Lindsey to talk to you a little bit more about the detail of how that project was then put together and the methodology. So over to you, Lindsey.
Hi everyone. So we knew there were a lot of people, many of whom were using their own segmentations or several versions of segmentations, who would need convincing that the business would be better off with a single view, if you like. For those of you that don't know Rupesh, this is of course exactly what he looks like. Similar get up on a day-to-day basis as well. But look, every organisation has its own challenges when launching a segmentation. We know that, and having worked closely with Sky for, well, many years now, we knew that convincing different teams who worked, well, back then they worked quite in a siloed fashion, would be the main challenge. So we worked with Rupesh to plan our comm strategy on this segmentation before we even started running the segmentation. It wasn't an afterthought. This was kind of how we were going to land this was at the very core of what we were doing. Overall, we needed it to be robust. It needed to stand up to review across all these different people within the marketing mix here. It was always going to get challenged. So we needed a robust solution up front, but we also needed to consider how we were going to sell this in at the back end. So now let's talk about investment now. So, how much should you invest in a typical segmentation solution? So that's the setup, the field work, the solution itself, the analysis, versus the selling of that particular solution. So we find people typically come to the table expecting to invest about 90% in the solution and about 10% in the selling of this. And what we advise clients here at Redblue is that you should be thinking or trying to think more around the kind of 50% solution, 50% sell-in. So both are as important as one another. Now, I know this isn't always going to mean financially you need to budget for that 50% for the sell-in. You know, investment can mean resource too. So typically when thinking about budget plus the amount of time you have, and your you know, time you have and your team has, if you like, and how much you will have to put into this, the closer you can get to 50% for that sell-in, the better. So with permission from Rupesh on this, we, you know, and we knew what his challenges were. We kind of pushed, I guess we pushed that 50% even further with Sky. So we were kind of lucky, I have to admit with this one, is that we actually ended up using an existing data set that we had to run the actual solution. So we've done a big U&A fairly recently, and we managed to use that data. So in terms of actually coming to the solution, because of the field work and you know, our analysts knew this really well, it was a fairly quick and cheap process to get to that solution, and not cheap, good value and perfectly formed, we'd like to say. And then what we did was we focused on using that budget and time to work on these things. So the first one was validation, and that kind of took two forms. So firstly, how did our solution work with all the previous, you know, I think there were about almost 100 segmentations that we kind of tried to map our segmentation to these other different, you know, some of them were classic segmentations, most were just kind of classification of the market. So we did a lot of work around that so that we could explain to each individual user of those segmentations how our one worked with theirs. And you know, this market segmentation had a really nice story, and it gave us some initially obvious targets, but I mean, really, you know, the thing was, could it work commercially for Sky? So a nice story about the market, but when we're talking about Sky and selling Sky products in a kind of fast-paced environment, does it work? So we knew that on top of this U&A data set that we had used, we would need to find out more. So secondly, I guess we also knew, you know, all those people that we saw on the previous page, we needed to give those people what they needed. So we needed the ammunition to go to stakeholders and explain just how this segmentation makes their lives easier, if you like. Now, that's what people are there to do, their job every day. We wanted to make their lives easier. And then another rule, which, you know, to be honest, scared the hell out of us, was be open to doing it all again. So if it didn't, Rupesh was really clear with us that if it didn't work commercially for Sky, then we'd have to start again. So scrapping our beautiful segmentation that we'd kind of invested a bit of time and you know, we loved it, Rupesh loved it as well. But it was very clear that, you know, when we were going through this validation, if it didn't work at any time, you know, if it broke, we'd have to start again. So that was a bit of a scary process, but it was in everyone's minds as we went through this. And then we also wanted to do some very careful branding. So without giving too much away too quickly on the segmentation, we kind of, you know, we held back the naming segments, for example, until we knew more about them, basically, until then the initial survey could tell us. So how do we go about doing that? So with lots of planning up front, I mean, you do, here's our CEO on the left here. And we engaged on a program of insight, really, to validate and engage each critical business area. So the CEO here, you do need, of course, this is really critical for any segmentation, and you probably all know this, but we will need buy-in at a senior level. And you know, the CEO, luckily at Sky, we managed to get that from her, so that was great. And she got her single latitudinal segmentation that covered all the core Sky products. So I think you all know this, but TV, broadband and mobile largely, and then but also, you know, the prospect market, which was key for this, but we also it also fit for customers as well. She got a wonderful story that the whole business and the C-suite could align behind when talking about strategy. You know, 8 lovely clear segments that added up to 4 for simplicity's sake. That worked really well, but we didn't view that segmentation and kind of satisfying her as the kind of be all and end all. We didn't stop there. We knew that if this was going to be a living, breathing segmentation in, well, quite frankly, as a rapidly changing business such as Sky, we needed to show that it worked for the challenges that the end users, and I guess we thought about them as the end implementers, face. So what about these guys who, you know, as remember, we're all using or each wedding to using their own ways of segmenting the market. So we got to understand exactly what each of the teams needed and address those needs throughout the course of our validation period. So, you know, first one here, product guy. So he wanted not only to know what products he could sell and cross-sell tomorrow, but you know, and what that price might look like. So a conjoint there, but he also wanted to know kind of what the Sky portfolio of the future might look like to help kind of target segments that were traditionally more close to Sky. So we did a menu-based conjoint there and fed those into a tool for them to use fairly simply. So I'll talk about that shortly. Then, you know, we have a trading guy with his headset on there. He also wanted detail. So what offers should his teams lead with to meet targets in certain segments? So using a conjoint, we could tell them exactly what hardware offer to use, what content offer to use, and for how long, and how to kind of structure those kind of headline messages. You know, the brand teams, that they wanted to raise, you know, as always, saliency and consideration, you know, but what exactly should we be talking about when we're talking about target segments? So we did a Maxif project to kind of understand that. And then lastly, sure loads of you will have done kind of similar before, if not your current role, then in similar roles. But you know, given Sky's the largest media spender in the UK, we worked with Kantar Media on a TGI fusion piece to help Mediacom target segments more effectively. And then I guess the key thing to say, and then also all projects since this segmentation was run has the golden questions on there. So we're kind of continually using you know, all the research and insight projects that that Sky do across all of their agencies and their big internal team as well. We have kind of all of that by this segmentation. So we're continually updating what we know about those segments. So I guess the key thing to say is all of these stages were designed to mimic the process customers at their various stages of the purchase funnel we're at in market at that particular time. All of the stages were designed to offer exactly what they needed to know on a segment basis, what these guys here needed to know on a segment basis. And so it was strategically useful for the CEO, but it was also tactically useful for the teams and the users and the implementers who were going to use this to help sell in one segmentation. But look, you know, I'm certainly not saying that, you know, when you run your big segmentation to sell it in, you need 7 different project stages to sell that in. But, you know, typically, you know, projects such as these might already be in flight in your business, or you know, might be on the roadmap that you can use. But you can't. What we are saying is you can't expect one single segmentation piece to kind of motivate all areas of a business and give you everything you need to ensure it lives and breathes within an organization. It's kind of it needs constant attention, but you know, of course it's worth it then, but you know, when it succeeds. And now I mentioned earlier that the kind of fourth point on that, on my first chart, was on my second chart, sorry, was that we wanted to take care of the branding on this to help sell it in. So one thing we did during this process, even when we had our segments early on, was we didn't name them. You know, I know people have different views on this as to whether you name them to get the marketing teams across things fairly quickly, or you don't name them. We decided not to name them, not until we knew more about them. Plus, you know, I think Rupesh would agree that everyone and his dog wanted an input on this part of it, so it felt a bit safer to wait. And I'm not going to take the credit for the clever branding of some of the tools that we developed. So we developed tools for each of these guys. I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But Rupesh was responsible for the branding of this. So there's a Broadway producer whose name was an anagram of segmentation. So we ended up calling the whole project itself Project Broadway. Rupesh must have been hungry or thirsty that day, but we had these tools. There was the Pringle tool, the Rum tool, the Ham tool, the BAP tool. TGI was yeah, that was TGI. And I know the name sounds silly, but actually it was kind of genius because it totally worked. We managed to give everyone what they needed to convince them to use this this segmentation. You know, I hear this around the business now, people talking about, well, Rum told me this, so actually Pringle told me this, and Ham told me this. So I know, you know, I hear that in meetings in lots of different meetings that we're in, I hear that people are still using these tools. So I know that kind of clever branding from Rupesh worked. And the tools that we developed were all self-serve tools that told each of these guys specifically what they needed to know about their segments to implement it in their everyday work. You know, it was detailed, but it worked. So for example, I won't take you through all of these, but for example, the rum tool told the marketing guys exactly what out of, I think it's about 140 Sky reasons to buy that they were working with, you know, what they should be saying to each of their segments to target them. You know, this group is particularly into TV, but should we lead with the best US shows or should we lead with movies, and what specifically about movies? The tool that we built for them, based off a Big Mac Stiff project, could do that. You know, again, I won't go through them all, but the BAP tool could tell you what brands are better received and sat well with the Sky brand for each segment. So the guys could think about brand partnerships to sell more. But you get the gist. Giving people the tools to do their roles well, using the segments, helps for those segments to be truly embedded. You know, and Rupesh will talk a bit about top down, bottom up shortly, but I think you get the gist.
I think the other bit that I just want to add to that, Lindsay, is that you have those tools, and yes, you have those tools which allow you to look at the data by the various segments that we have designed, but in those tools also sits unofficial and segmentations that they may have used in the past, so that they can really see that, okay, your old segmentation, or a segmentation that you think is better than this unified one, your data looks like this for message hierarchy, but if you use the unified one, then your messaging hierarchy looks like this, and that soon starts to become apparent to people that actually I'm getting a similar story, or actually I can talk about why I'm talking about this particular message or this particular product to another team, and then sell that into them. So yeah, I think those things worked really, really well. So look, I want to talk a little bit about. Sorry, Lindsay.
No, it's just because it gave people confidence as well to see the sort of two side by side and see how, you know, it was kind of a kind of working example of how this segmentation can work alongside theirs or instead of.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we took that further. So we gained that confidence around the business, but we wanted to push that confidence even further and make sure that we really, really had confidence that the segments that we landed on were the right ones for our business in a unified way. So we called in an agency called Signify. Signify, what they did is they used their AI tool to scrape social media and find these segments in social media, and find some other segmentation tools as well, and really tell us, right, from a social media point of view and people's feeds and organic comments about anything, what can you tell us? And it was an open brief, and they came back and they told us some cool things about each segment's personality traits, what tones and language they like in advertising. They also told us what brands they're affiliated with, and brands that they don't like so much as well. And it was really interesting to have that open brief and to find that there was a lot of differentiation, that even another agency using a completely different methodology were able to find some differentiation. So I've left Joe's email up there, but you can please feel free to contact Joe to talk about what they do. Relative Insight was another agency that we used, and Amy's emails are there. And what they did was they basically took all the open-ended questions that we have from our internal trackers and the data that Redblue had already collected as well, which all have the attitudinal flags, segment flags in there, and just gave them all of that open-ended text from all of our surveys, and just landed that with the agency and said, look, play around with that open text and see what you come back with. And they have a really good text analytics linguistic tool where they can really, really quickly just start pulling it apart and start to really understand, do they see differences as well? And they also came back and reassured us that they saw some different personality traits, and then it all added to our eventual pen portraits that we landed on. And then BAMM, I'm going to talk about a little bit more, but they were really our agency to help us with our internal marketing. And as Lindsay said, I'm passionate about making sure that the insight projects that we do at Sky, and especially this one with segmentation, was branded really well, and the internal marketing that sat around the segmentation was of paramount importance, and that's why we called in BAMM. So tell you a little bit more about what they did for us. Is the slide moving?
Next video.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So you know, when I thought about that internal marketing framework that we wanted to use in the business, I really thought to myself, look, I'm trying to get this segmentation to live with marketing people and product people. Well, I need to start thinking like them. And what do? When they are looking at their consumers, they have a segmentation. So why shouldn't I segment my internal stakeholders? And why shouldn't I use a marketing funnel like the one that you see here? I need to raise awareness around the business that this segmentation exists. I need them to consider using this segmentation. I need them to consider using this particular segmentation over others. And I need them to be using it in their everyday work. And that's why those tools that Lindsay talked about, the Ham tool, Pringle tool, were created, because it allowed me to tell the business that here are tools, here is the tools and mechanisms that allow you to use and consider this segmentation over others. And then the stakeholder groups, I think you saw the stakeholder group right at the beginning of the presentation, but really picking off each area and making sure that I had the right products to the right segments within my internal framework. For the broadband team, I needed to give them specific tools and insights for them, mobile, TV, etc. The C-suite as well, they all needed that. So that framework was really important to nail. And then making sure that the golden question sat in every piece of research that existed post this launch. And then BAMM came in to help us with segment videos. So you'd all have probably done something similar, where each of the segments had a video where we were able to go into the consumer's home and film who they are, and they had a great way of putting those together. So we had some videos that launched off the back of that. The important part of what BAMM did for us was they launched a how-to video. So this was an introductory video that told the business how the segmentation came about, what the benefits of this single language were, and how it was going to live in the business for a while. But essentially, that how-to video, it was really important that we went through that process of explaining to people how a segmentation is used and where it's helpful to them. And so that was a really unique part of that. Now, look, I want to talk about this very important question. I think this is a really key one, which I think it's, and maybe you've had this in your mind as we've been talking, which is, right, you can have a segmentation that's one size fits all, and you can shout loud and proud about it through your business, like what we did. You know, we had a single language in the business, or your various different product areas or your various different departments could have their own segmentation. Now, if each department and each product area has their own segmentation, let's be honest, they will get maximum differentiation in their attitude statements within their survey. Or you could have a single language. That means that your differentiation is slightly dampened by each of the product areas, but that single language has that huge benefit of meaning that all the different areas can sit around the table, have budget conversations, have strategy conversations, that allows them to piece all of their various strategies together in the right way, and thereby being more consumer-led and being more consumer first, which I guess is what we're trying to achieve. Cool. So, Lindsay, is the build?
It's kind of
Right. So I want to just be aware that when we're having this discussion, because by having that one segmentation, you will come to a point where various people around the business will go, well, that single segmentation isn't quite good enough for my particular need or my particular product area. And we did analysis like this. So this is just an example. So imagine this was the percentage of people that watch TV out of the home. If you did a TV-based segmentation just on TV attitudes, you'd get a lot more differentiation. But a unified one, you'd probably get slightly less. But as you can see with that green line and that blue line, there's not much in it. So that single benefit is really important. And the other challenge that will happen a lot is people will be asking us to append an attitude-based segmentation like the one that we've got here into the database. And the advice that I've given anyway, in my experience, is that you probably have better tools in your one-to-one marketing and your one-to-one targeting where your database tells you a lot more about behavior. Use those and don't try to force an attitude-based segmentation down into your database when the match back or the complex linking of the two ends up fruiting in something that's might as well be random. But what you should be trying to do is go, right, I have this segmentation that doesn't need to be famous, that I have this way of cutting up my database for this particular need, and this is the segment that I'm going after. Whatever language you're using in that one-to-one below the line specific space, use it in that space only, but understand how that fits up into a more global attitudinal based segmentation, and call it that. And so I think it is about labeling. It's about linking up so that when it's outside of that team, you're able to communicate via a lens that everybody understands. So be pragmatic. Cool. And I just wanted to reiterate the point that, especially for Sky, this segmentation was a project that we started 18 months, 2 years ago. It's something that continues to live today. I would like to say it's the most successful segmentation that Sky has ever launched. It's nearly 2 years old now. It's because Sky realized that when we launched a segmentation, that segmentation was a living, breathing project that needed to continue, and we need to continue learning about those segments. It wasn't a one-time thing. And to do that, it's really important that you embed those golden questions into as many surveys or as many performance metrics as you possibly can. If it's an ad hoc piece of research about something that might not seem related, stick the golden questions in, because you are continually learning more about each of the segments. And you will come to a point, maybe every 6 months, maybe every 12 months, where you sweat all that data and all that ad hoc data and build your segmentation further and find those new news stories about each of the segments. So it's definitely a living, breathing thing. And then inevitably your company or your organization will have a new product roadmap, will have new challenges, and you'll need to continually assess them and launch new products, but new products, new surveys, where you need to embed this segmentation into that project. And obviously never forgetting that the performance by the segments is a really important part. If we're not able to measure the performance by the segments, it will very quickly fall away, and therefore it's important to report it and market that report and make sure that there's debate and action that comes off the back of those performance presentations. So just going to finish up on telling you a little bit about how it's changed Sky and how it's really helped us as a business. I'm sure everybody knows, but we launched Now Broadband. We've launched Sky Essentials, another proposition into the market, and they were born out of identifying segments that we needed to go after from this segmentation. So a hugely proud moment for us, knowing that segmentation was the birthplace of these two very successful products. And there's a couple of segments here which I won't name that we haven't traditionally done too well in, and then the acquisitions from those numbers have started to increase as well. So that's it from me and Lindsay. My last slide is about questions. So look, I've got Lindsay's email address there, so please do feel free to contact her to talk about the methodology and talk to you about your particular problems that you and projects that you might want to talk to her about. And please feel free to also add me on LinkedIn and ask me questions. And my client-side Insight blog, Insight Bumble, which I'm going to relaunch in a couple of weeks. Please do follow me, and I'll be talking more about some other Insight topics on that as well. So yeah, over to you guys. Any questions?
Rupesh, Lindsey, thank you very much for a really interesting presentation. Can I invite the participants to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the page with any questions? And I can see they're starting to pop in. I'll relay the first one. Is there an optimum number of segments that work best? You have 4 here.
Yeah, hi Kay. Yeah, good question. And the reason, for me, it depends on the stakeholder. So in a media environment, 4 is enough, and we needed to make sure that the media guys could use it. But then when it came to proposition and product design, we allowed them to have 8. So the model that we have in our segmentation is 8 segments that ladder up into 4, and that allows there to be flexibility by stakeholder. So certain stakeholders you would use the 4 level, and certain stakeholders you'd use the 8 level. But that flexibility is really important. An 8-level segmentation for a media guy would be correct, wouldn't work, but a 4-level one wouldn't work for a proposition or a person either.
Good stuff, thank you. Kay's popped in another question. Rupesh, did you use your own customer data, or did you also incorporate non-customers?
Yeah, both. So we had non-customers and customers in the survey, because we started with the foundation that attitudes would sit across both customers and non-customers, and it allowed us to understand the transition between prospects and customers back out into prospects.
Okay, I've got a question that's been popped into the chat box from Kat, asking, have you been asked to expand to more sub-segments?
No, not really. We've been people have very much stuck to those 8, and they do break them up. And the interesting part of that question is people then start going, well, segment X, younger part of that segment and older, and they almost have their unofficial segmentation starts kicking in. Marketing people have this DNA of linking everything back to life stage or competitor platform, and they try to cut up, and you really have to explain to the business, you know, this is getting to the heart of what consumers really want. It doesn't matter how old they are, it doesn't matter what platform they're on, this is what they really want. Now that then means that you have to take that unofficial segmentation which they've got in their head, which is why they've tried to sub segment, and prove to them that the attitude segmentation is versus your unofficial one gives you completely different answers.
And I'd say that, you know, 8's quite a lot of people to get their heads around anyway. I think 8, you know, 8 across the market is actually is detailed enough. You know, lots of people use the 4 version of it. But when you get down to 8, it does provide quite a lot of detail. So further segmenting, it's not necessarily something that people do very often.
I think, Rose, you've got a good question here on were the validation projects in scope from the start, and how did you get the buy-in for all of those? Look, it was really important for me to get that buy-in from the beginning. Just asking someone a flat question around their attitudes and usage, unbranded, unpriced, was only the foundation. What I was very clear on, it was that consumers don't think in a linear fashion. You know, if you say to me, I watch TV on the go, it does not mean that I should put a billboard in front of you with Sky Go. It might be something that you've thought about long and hard, but in a 30-second dwell time on a billboard, or 3-second dwell time on a billboard, you might not get excited by that. You might get excited by a different message. So it was really important for us to sell into the business that the attitude-based survey was something where the consumer had thought long and hard about their attitudes, but we really needed to replicate the marketing experience and the dwell times to really understand whether the various messages that we have, and were going to resonate as well. And in some segments it does, it flows straight through. In some segments it doesn't. So we had to get that buy-in from the beginning.
Rupesh, there's a really interesting question from Edith. She said, really interesting, thank you very much. There's so much to consider when kicking off a new segmentation. How did you go about that? Did you use a framework to help you structure your thinking?
Yes, I think so. I think that for me, we did take a pause. We were given a quite a quick deadline to come up with the attitude-based segmentation, but we had to very quickly do the reconnaissance by going round the various teams and using the organizational structure that existed at Sky anyway as our framework to say, right, these are the people that we need to talk to, and we need to very quickly get their needs down, and start to make sure that which ones we're going to cover, which ones we weren't going to cover. So using the organizational structure was our blueprint for who we needed to talk to and which departments we were going to address.
Absolutely, I'd agree with that as well. In that it is all about getting the stakeholders on board. That is absolutely paramount. And also, as well as that, kind of setting expectations about what this will deliver and what it won't, is the other key thing at that stage as well.
Was there any particular internal ally that proved to be more important than any of the others?
I'd have to say my CEO, Lisa, was a key sponsor, and she was a big advocate, and she wanted to make sure that our decisions were as customer first as they could possibly be, and she very much was a driving force behind this. So I'm very proud to have landed this for her. So I think she was a key ally. The second key ally is media. Let's not forget the media team are the ones that are going to have to land the marketing at the end. And if they can't find change in the way that they are able to move their media slightly, then it becomes quite difficult. So ensuring that their needs were met, and we did that by validating our segmentation against life stage, but also validating against small things like interest in music or interest in your political persuasion, etc., which we knew were really important to how consumers in the UK consume media. Talking to other territories around the world, it might be something slightly different. In Italy, your media persuasion is kind of your geography makes quite a bit of difference there. So that's important. So media and the CEO.
Okay, there are 4 questions. Martin Silcock's clearly on a mission here. There are 4 questions from Martin. How do you link in the commercial data to size the segments? Is the first of his questions.
So we're lucky enough to have a joiners and leavers survey. So people who join the business and leave the business, customers who leave and join, we ask them to fill in a survey to understand who they are, and our golden questions kind of go into there. So that allows us to then understand our performance for joining and leaving, and I think that is a really important tool that we have. I think that's the main one for performance.
Okay, the second question is, what were the main dimensions that divided up and drove this segmentation structure? What were the dimensions that pulled people apart?
So the attitudes were at the heart. So attitudes on why, how, what TV and TV content people like to watch and how they like to consume it, broadband attitudes and then mobile attitudes. Those were the core parts of the cluster analysis. And then we only picked the cluster analysis after we then reviewed and considered life stage, considered media consumption, considered other key attributes. And if there wasn't enough differentiation, we asked Lindsey to tweak and amend so that we were able to land some differentiation on those other attributes. But core things were unbranded attitudes and needs for TV, mobile, and broadband.
Perfect. The third question from Martin is, how much socio-cultural information is built into the segments?
I think it's more of a byproduct. I think we tripped over and accidentally found that there was differentiation on people's personality and then the way they live their lives and lifestyles. It wasn't a part of the core part. It just so happened to be that we landed on some differentiation there. And I think that's down to the fact that I think when we first run the cluster analysis, we just double checked life stage and some basic media differentiation things, which then in turn gave us good lifestyle differentiation.
I'm going to link together a question from James and a question from Edith, because I think both in the same direction. When you created the segmentation, did you replace existing category segmentations, or is everyone now using this one segmentation?
We very much replaced, it wasn't my intention to replace the category ones. It was my intention to understand how different the category ones were to an umbrella one. Now, if the umbrella segmentation was not good enough for one of the particular categories, I think it would be fair to say that we would want the category to run their business via their own lens. We found that although the category segmentations were differentiated more, the umbrella one wasn't that far off, and that's a judgment call. There's no statistical analysis that you could do to figure that out. You know, that is just eyeball. Have a look, and you'll see. And as you know, that line chart that I showed, you see that actually you don't lose too much differentiation. So you know what, you might as well get on board and look at the world through one lens and lose out on slightly on your category differentiation.
Cool. There's probably time for a couple more questions and then we'll need to wrap up. Paul Weston of SSE is asking, what percentage write back did you manage on the attitudinal segmentation? He goes on to say he knows that it can be as low as 50% because he heard EE deliver that statistic at a presentation previously delivered at an Aura seminar.
Right. Do you mean match back to the database? Do you think?
That's what I'd interpret from the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, that's really important, and that happens time and time again. You know, I've launched a number of segmentations, and people have tried to drag an attitude segmentation down into a database. It's got to a point for me where I advise, do not try to match it into your database, because you might as well be picking people at random. Let your database live and breathe by the data analysts that you have in your organization that will be coming up with propensity models and really clever tools. Use them, leverage them, because they are going to be better. And let your one-to-one targeting that you will use that database for, use those tools. But if you're going after deciles 7 to 10, profile them and use a pragmatic approach and go, okay, profile 8 to 10 look like this. They're likely to be segment 5. Okay, so when you want to go to the business and say, I am going after segment 5, use the language of the umbrella segmentation, but implement using the clever segmentations that sit in your database. So we at Sky we feel like we're being effective and efficient by not appending it into our database.
I think, Paul, just to kind of expand on your question a little bit, but you know, 50% in my opinion isn't that bad. So you know, we've achieved kind of where things have worked in the past well before. It's such a challenge matching to your database. It really is, you know, especially for kind of long-standing organisations where the database is kind of patchy. I think you know, 70 is probably the best that we've ever done, and it's been a real process. So 50% can be good. I mean, it depends how many segments you've got. If you've only got 2 segments, then 50% is not very good, because you know, you may as well just have done it by chance. But you know, if you've got 8 segments, then that's not necessarily that bad. And you know, arguably, if you've got, you know, if before that particular segmentation, then EE might not have been able to target anybody on their database by attitudes, but actually now they can do that for 50% of their database. So if you kind of look at it that way, then you know, I don't think that's necessarily really bad. I think it's decent.
I just want to add to that. If you know the database and you know the various variables that you already have from the beginning, so there might be things like life stage things and all the hard data points that you have. You know, that's why it's really important to, when you do get your cluster analysis back from your partner, to review those clusters by life stage and those kind of hard demographic things, because then you can say, right, okay, if I do see some tweaks here, then I can assume and make some good pragmatic approaches that everybody who is over 55 is likely to be segment 5 or is likely to be this. So it's good to kind of life stage and those hard things. It's good to do a review and just see if there's 2 cluster options and one is slightly better on life stage and hard demographics, choose that one because of that exact point.
Yeah, and I think it's a real toss up between, you know, do you want something that is you know, is really successful matching back to your database? You're going to have to go with something that's a bit more behavioral driven, whereas on this one, you know, Rupesh was really clear that, you know, to work at what we needed it to work with, it needed to be very kind of needs based and attitudinal based. So, and that, you know, that's then trickier to match back to your database, obviously.
Okay, one final question, and we're going to link together entries from Joe, Edith and Martin, because they're talking about the killing off of the previous segmentations if you had to do that, and what were the challenges that you encountered?
Look, I probably every 6 months since the launch of this segmentation have had one area of the business challenge me to say, we're moving away from the unified segmentation, we're going to go with our own category one. And it was really simple. Opening up the data to them and to say, right, what are the business decisions that you are making, and what are the key data points that you need? And they'll say, right, I'm making a decision about X, Y, Z, and these are the data points that I need. Right, okay, well, let's look at the differentiation that you get with your own segmentation and what you get with the unified one. And we have a very open meeting with them and literally put the data on the table and have a discussion and a debate, and it is 2 to 3 hours long every time. But every time we come back with the same conclusion, which is your category segmentation is different, is better, but this one is not that far off, and it brings you together. So they are killing off their category segmentation. I think they eventually realize the benefits of a unified view, and eventually they will bin it themselves. But it won't be a battle that you'll win once. You'll have to win it again and again and again. Good
answer, Rupesh. Good answer. Look, we'll have to wrap up now. I'm afraid I have no idea where the time has gone today, which is testament to the just how good the presentation was. So, Rupesh, Lindsey, thank you very much for giving such a sterling presentation, and thank you to everyone for taking part. Really only remains for me to say that all Aura sessions are available to members on the Aura website. This one, of course, will be added within the next couple of days. And I should remind everyone to sign up for next Wednesday's triplet of webinars. In normal circumstances, of course, we would have been at the RAF Club in London, but here's the first mention of COVID-19 today, demands that we use Zoom for a digital day, basically. So the topic is the best agencies you've probably never heard of. And let me whet your appetite by saying that the opening presentation will be from Listen and Learn, I'll say that again, Listen and Learn, on loneliness. Can there be a more apt topic in this time of social distancing? So till we meet again, stay safe and stay well. Goodbye now.